Hello, everyone. Boa tarde, buenos dias, bonsoir, good afternoon. So good to see all of you here. My name is Lucia Lohman, and I currently serve as president of the International Association for Plant Taxonomists. And it's really a great pleasure to see all of you today. I see so many familiar faces and people from all over the world. And it's actually really exciting to see such a great global turnaround, which really reflects the international and collaborative spirit of the IAPT. Well, maybe I'll start with a few words about the IAPT. And as many of you know, the International Association for Plant Taxonomy was established in 1950 with the goal to promote, to support, and facilitate taxonomic, systematics, and nomenclatural research on algae, fungi, and plants. Today, we have around 1,000 members from across the globe, including many students and researchers and professionals that are really united by a shared passion to understand plant diversity. And this year, we are very excited because this is a very meaningful year for us as we actually celebrate IAPT's 75th anniversary. As part of our celebration, we are really taking some time to reflect on the legacy of all of those who helped shape the association and all of those who helped shape the field of plant taxonomy, while we are also taking some time to really think about the future of our discipline. In fact, if you're interested in reading a little bit more about the IAPT and the whole history, I recommend that you take a look at the classic paper by Cohen and Staflo, which was published in Taxon in 1982, and you can find it available on our website. And so the fact that the IAPT is a truly global association actually makes it really hard for us to meet in person on a regular basis. And this is why we decided to launch the IAPT Webinar series, which allows us to connect the community of plant taxonomists and the community of plant systematists with very engaging discussions on topics that are dear to all of us in the field. So each of our webinars, they are recorded and they are available to the whole community through our YouTube channel. But as an IAPT member, you actually get the extra bonus of being able to watch it live, to engage in the discussions, and to ask questions throughout the webinar. Some additional benefits from IAPT membership include the free access to Taxon. You also get free APC waivers for your publications in Taxon. You're eligible to apply to our research grants and to our small collections grants. You're also able to participate in the webinar series and also in a series of training workshops that we are just launching. And you also get to enter our IAPT photo contest. And perhaps most importantly, you're actually able to connect to this global community of plant taxonomists and systematists and to help us shape the future of our field. Want to take a moment just to remind all of you that this is really your association, and we really would like to be able to count on your regular participation and expertise. We have many IAPT committees that you can join, many exciting projects that we would like for you to help engage. And your ideas are really essential as we continue to build the next chapter of the IAPT. So please make sure that your membership is active, and also please make sure that you share information about IAPT to other colleagues and friends and bring them on board to the association. Also, feel free to contact any of us in the IAPT Council to suggest any ideas or thoughts of new initiatives that you may have. For example, feel free to suggest new webinar topics, or feel free to even propose to host a new webinar yourself. You can really reach us anytime, and you can find all of our contact information on the IAPT website. So, okay, without any further ado, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and turn us into the topic that is bringing us here today. So our webinar of today is entitled Sharing Taxonomic Data with Biodiversity and Nomenclature Databases. This is an area that really touches every corner of our discipline, from the way the specimens are digitized and cataloged in Herbaria to the way that names and traits and genomic data are shared and connected across global platforms. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and they are joining us from throughout the Americas, and they will offer a wide variety of perspectives on many different topics that range from the origin of the world's herbaria to the taxonomic impediment, the future of collections-based research, and the vital role of our global databases. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our moderators for today's webinars, both of whom are highly respected members of our botanical community and also members of the IAPT Council. And they're Morgan Gostel and Laura Lagomarsino. Morgan, he is the John Willeman Director of Plant Science at the Morris Arboretum and Gardens and at the University of Pennsylvania. And he's also a research associate at both the Botanical Research Institute of Texas and the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institution. He also serves as director of the Global Genome Initiative for Gardens, which is an international partnership of botanic gardens that is dedicated to collecting herbarium vouchers from living collections, preserving their genomic resources, and making them available to researchers worldwide through a coordinated network of biobanks. Morgan's research explores the systematics and evolution of the hyperdiverse plant family, the Compositae, with a particular focus on Africa and Madagascar. And Morgan has really been a driving force in building collaborative bridges among botanical institutions and really ensuring that genetic resources that we collect today remain discoverable, accessible, and valuable for generations to come. And we are really grateful for all the work that he does. And our second moderator is Laura Lagomarsino, who's an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Louisiana State University, where she also serves as the director of the Shirley Tucker Herbarium. Her research combines systematics and biogeography and floromorphology to understand the evolutionary history of many neotropical plant groups, and her lab's research has a special focus on the systematics and macroevolution of the Andean flora, with the current emphasis on the plant families Campanulaceae and Rubiaceae. Laura is also deeply committed to inclusive and collections-based research and to really mentoring the next generation of systematists, and we are really grateful to all her efforts in that front. She also serves as an associate editor for Taxon, contributing her time and expertise to our IAPT journal. So, well, and actually I'm especially pleased that Laura is now spending her sabbatical here at the Missouri Botanical Garden, dividing her time between the garden and the National Herbarium in Columbia. She just arrived here in St. Louis, and I'm really looking forward to spending time with her in the coming months. So, well, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Laura, and who will start by introducing our first speaker and getting us started. So Laura, over to you.
Awesome. Lucia, thanks so much for that introduction. And thanks everybody here for showing up today. We're really excited to see this wonderful turnout. And a special thanks, of course, for awesome speakers. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Barbara Thiers. Barbara, maybe while I'm introducing you, you can pull up your slides. We all know Barbara in this webinar today. She is known not only for Index Herbariorum, but for her stalwart advocacy for natural history collections broadly. Barbara is the Director Emerita of the William and Linda Steer Herbarium of the New York Botanical Garden and the editor of Index Herbariorum, which we'll hear more about today. Since 2021, she has been a research associate of the Denver Botanic Gardens, where she is building a reference collection of Colorado bryophytes. She is also a member of the advisory board of the Biodiversity Collections Network and secretary of the Natural Science Collections Alliance. So, with no further ado, take it away, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that nice introduction. As advertised, I'm going to be talking about Index Herbariorum, which I'm sure you all know is a worldwide index of herbaria and associated staff that tells where our global fungal and plant collections are permanently housed. Index Herbariorum this year is celebrating its 95th birthday. It started by the IAPT in 1935. The primary motivation, as I understand it, was to have a consistent method of determining where specimens were deposited. So in a taxonomic paper where it was important to cite types and other specimens, I guess prior to Index Herbariorum, these were often cited by abbreviations, which might vary by language or just by what name you called the institution. And it was difficult on sometimes to figure out exactly where that specimen was deposited. So really way before their time, the IAPT decided to assign a unique identifier to each herbarium. And there were letters, not numbers, but that is really what allowed the one-to-one correlation of code to name, allowed people to find specimens. It went through 8 print editions, and then it moved to a searchable database in 1997, and to its current platform in 2003. And then we upgraded the data structure and the website and the protocols in 2016. So since the New York Botanical Garden took over Index Herbariorum in 1965, it's just had 2 editors, Patricia Holmgren, who is really responsible for making Index Herbariorum what it is. She internationalized it, she standardized it, and Noel Holmgren was responsible for creating the first database and transferring the data to it. So the Holmgrens are the reason that Index Herbariorum has remained the vital reference for the botanical community that it is. And then I took over in 2008. The information is not changed much that we store in Index Herbariorum. We've added websites and email addresses and a few other fields, but I believe that one of the reasons that the index has been as long-lasting as it is that we have kind of resisted mission creep. There have been suggestions over times of many other types of information that could be included, but we have kept it simple and tried to focus just on the original intent, which is to identify herbaria and to summarize where they are and what they hold. And it should be noted, and I'll make this point again, there are actually 2 databases associated with the index. There's the index, there's the database of herbaria, and then there's a separate index of staff. So I'll say more about this in a minute. Index Herbariorum is maintained entirely by the New York Botanical Garden. It is an integral part of the garden's virtual herbarium, which means it's linked to the shipping records, for example, as well as the specimen database. And it is the garden's really very excellent biodiversity information management staff that is responsible for all of the behind the scenes stuff, the hardware, the backup, the licensing, the maintenance, etc. And as I've already told you, the editing has been traditionally the responsibility of the director, but it isn't part of the original job description. And aside from the times when we have had National Science Grant funds, there has never been a budget associated with Index Herbariorum. The most common way people access the data is to go to the web page and enter a code or a name or a location. You can also access it through the map, about which I'll say more in a moment. Beginning in 2017, we introduced a very important change, and that is that participants are requested to update their own information, to register their new herbaria and register new staff members. What they do is fill out a form. That form comes to me for approval and then is uploaded, then is released basically to the web. The requirements for registration are extremely simple. We want to be as inclusive as possible. Each institution has to select a unique code, ideally 6 letters or less, no non-alphabetic characters like dashes or dots or anything like that. You must have at least one specimen, and you must be willing to allow anyone with a reasonable, legitimate reason to do so to examine the specimens in the herbarium. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too far. I mentioned the map before. This is just a part of the screen you see if you click the map option. If you could see the whole screen, you'd see that in the upper left, there is a button that says List View. I'm showing you this because this is how you would go about, anybody can download the entire Index Herbariorum database if they want to. And the way you would do that is you would go to the map function, and then in the upper left-hand corner at that List View, you would click on that. It would give you in turn a list view, sort of just a summary of the data, snapshot of the data. But then if you click on the 3 lines in the upper right corner, you will get a download of the entire database, which is up to date as of the last update to the database. Another way to get information in a summary form, if you go down a little farther on that main screen, you see that there is a link for annual and quarterly reports. This, unfortunately, we did not begin to do this until 2016. I wish we had begun to capture annual snapshots earlier, but it is what it is. So we have an annual report for every year. And then this year, I've started issuing quarterly reports. Because there seems to be interest in it. And so every quarter, I've sort of summarized the new information. We'll continue to do the annual report too, of course. You can also link to make Index Herbariorum data part of your own application through our API. This is the GitHub page that teaches you how to do that. And this is the way that GBIF accesses Index Herbariorum data on a weekly basis to feed into GR-SciCol, which is their global index of scientific collections. So the way that herbarium information gets into GR-SciCol is by an Index Herbariorum entry, which then on a weekly basis finds its way to GR-SciCol through GBIF's intervention. This just gives us a snapshot of where we are right now. There are 4,019 herbaria holding about 403, almost 404 million specimens worldwide. The table on the left shows how those break down by regions, and we can see immediately that Europe and North America hold 50%, and in the cases of specimens, 75% of all herbaria specimens and staff. However, during the past decade, the largest increase in the number of herbaria have been in the other areas, North Asia, the Caribbean, South America, and South Asia most intensively. But reflecting the origin of herbaria as a European institution, and North America adopting them not long after, they still hold the bulk of specimens. Since 2016, we've added 890 herbaria, closed 112 for a net gain of 778. We've added a net of 22,158 specimens, and the total has increased by about 5,766,000 specimens. This is the only index I've ever edited, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but it feels to me like it's very active. There are an average of 25 updates per week. Life would be simpler if there weren't also 200 spam messages per week, but that's just the way it is. And it takes the equivalent of 1 NYBG workday per week to maintain the index. I'm sorry, I went backwards. And I tell you these statistics because every time a herbarium is closed or threatened to be closed, the Duke University is the one that has caused the most furor lately. Reporters find their way back to me for information from the index, and I think what they're sort of hoping to hear is that yes, there's a downward trend. Herbaria are closing. Look how many have closed in the past, whatever, decade or so forth. And it's actually not true. That doesn't mean that herbaria aren't in trouble and aren't undergoing physical and administrative threats on a daily basis. But the actual number of collections is not the metric. And I think it's a very sort of global north-centric view somehow that when one herbarium closes, oh, that must mean there's a worldwide trend and so forth. But I would love it if more people would share the message that herbaria are suffering threats and potentially will be suffering more. However, the enterprise is still strong. There's still a need for it. Herbaria have always moved around from one place to another. The crisis we're facing now is when very large herbaria want to be moved, and no one, potentially will be able to take them. And honestly, the data in Index Herbarum, as much as I would like it to be, cannot really be used to predict the future of any herbarium or herbaria in general. Herbariorum is very much, always has been, a community resource, and it depends exclusively on updates from participants for accurate and up-to-date information, which means you. And we could really use some help in figuring out what is the deal with these 809 herbaria for which there are no current data. They haven't been updated since 2007 or sometimes long before. We tried in 2007 with NSF funds to track down every herbarium, but there were quite a few, a fifth of all herbaria for which we have no current information. If you would like to try to help with these, you can download the data. It'll be obvious from the notes field which ones these are. The other things you can do, I hope you do, is update your record frequently with changes in staff and email addresses and so forth. And I'd really like to recommend that everyone check their entry every year. Pick a day, hopefully not all the same day for my sake, but pick a day where your birthday or the date of the founding of your institution or something, and just look over your record, update the specimen total, etc., and report any non-functional email addresses to me. Thank you. I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. That was really excellent. I hope everyone who's participating takes that moment to mark their calendar for updating Index Herbariorum for their institution. Hopefully not all today, because tomorrow you might wake up bombarded. If you're paying attention to the chat, I thank you to several of you who have contributed questions already. Please continue to do so. We're going to hold questions and answers until the end with each of the speakers. So that being said, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Andrea Weeks. Andrea Weeks is an associate professor in the Department of Biology at George Mason University and director of the Ted R. Bradley Herbarium. Her research focuses on systematics, historical biogeography, and evolution of flowering plants, particularly those in the frankincense and myrrh family, Burseraceae. She is president-elect of the American Society of Plant Taxonomists, ASPT, and an active member of CISRIS, a US-based initiative to support inclusive and sustainable collections-based research infrastructure for systematics. Today, she will be presenting Supporting Inclusive Collections-Based Research for Infrastructure with Bionomia. And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Andrea. Thank you.
Great. All right. So I'm cognizant of the time, so I will go as efficiently as I can. So I want to thank the organizers of the seminar series for inviting me to talk to you all today. And this is a project that has been ongoing for the past 2 years. And it uses the Bionomia online database tool as a key ingredient in this initiative. So I want to talk to you about that today. Okay, the CISRIS initiative is a workshop and symposium series for plant systematists and herbarium collections professionals that has been funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. Its mission is described by its acronym. It supports inclusive and sustainable research infrastructure for systematics. And one of its main objectives is to increase the use of bionomia.net by the community. Sisters workshops train people in biodiversity informatics tools that uncover people data from natural history collections from the specimens themselves. These tools allow researchers to cite their intellectual contributions to natural history collection specimens, either as collectors of those specimens or as identifiers of those specimens. These tools help us create a more inclusive understanding of the people who have actually built these collections. These tools will also ultimately help us advance systematics research by improving the collections databases. So as we're all aware, in the context of a herbarium specimen label, the people data that I'm referring to refers to the text strings of people's names in the collected by field and in the identified by field. And in the context of this label, here we see that someone named Mr. Krauss collected this specimen in the 1960s, and then someone by the name of L. Arts identified the species. Who are these people? Unique identifiers for people data can be included in Dartmoor database architecture. But the application of these unique identifiers requires community participation. So in the context of this slide, I show you in bolded black letters the actual terms for the Darwin core architecture, the database fields. And what you can see here are listed 3 individuals' names. The first 2 actually refer to a single individual. So Mrs. C.C. Bruce and Josephine Cornelia Austin are actually the same historical botanist, but they went by many names over the course of their life. They can be identified uniquely using a Wikidata Q number, and Bionomia.net uses these Wikidata Q numbers as the unique identifier for historical individuals, that is, people who are deceased. The other individual in this slide, Mary Smith, just as an example, is a living botanist, and she can be identified by her ORCID number. And that is inserted in the Darwin core field for identified by ID. And these ORCID numbers are the unique identifiers for living or extant botanists that is used in the Bionomia.net database. And just briefly, Bionomia is a very complex tool, but very briefly, Bionomia.net is an online database, and it pulls all collection records from GBIF and allows registered users on the Bionomia website to append these unique identifiers for people, either in the collection field or in the identified by field. And it stores this information where later this information can be reviewed by the data managers or the herbarium curators who take care of the digital data. And they can then import that data into their institution's databases. So they're repatriating that data about the unique identifiers into their institution's database. And then at some point in the future, feed that back to GBIF to complete the circle of this sharing of information. Sisters workshops last about 4 hours, and participants arrive having done about 1 hour of pre-workshop homework, which includes watching a video, skimming a paper about the power of people data to advance systematics research. And they also create a login profile on the Bionomia website, and they do this using their ORCID. And the first thing that participants do when they arrive is they begin to use Bionomia to do this attribution work for historical botanists. In the case of this workshop, we focus on underrepresented groups of people. The next thing that participants do in this workshop is they use Bionomia to locate and claim their own specimens. So these are their own collections or the collections for which they are listed as the identifier. And by claiming them, by appending their orchid to these records, they build a profile page about their intellectual contributions to these collections. And so this is an example of a page, a snapshot of one of these profile pages for one particular botanist. And this page automatically maps the location of their collections. It lists where institutionally their specimens are being held. And it also reports the different scientific papers that have been published using their specimens. And all of this information, it's pulled in for GBIF, but it's collated in one place for the individual. Then, using Zenodo, which is another tool that is free to use, they create a DOI. So this is a link. This is a citation, essentially, for their specimen-based work. And this is something that they can put into their CV, share with their supervisor as a record of their intellectual contributions. Now, Bionomia only sees specimen data that are shared to GBIF. And this generates a lot of discussion among participants in this workshop because particularly among the more established botanists who do this, they realize that many of their specimens have not yet been digitized. And initially, this leads to some frustration, but it quickly segues into a discussion about sort of these productive conversations about how they themselves can assist institutions in getting their collections digitized and shared to GBIF so that people can claim their work and show it to others. The last thing that participants do in these workshops is they watch the workshop leaders do a live demonstration of creating a wiki data entry for a historical botanist, and then going through the process of linking this information to Bionomia so that we can then go looking for the specimens created by what previously was essentially a hidden figure in science. And this was in addition to our curriculum based on feedback we received from the first workshop. When we realized that many of our workshop participants, they had people they wanted to do research on, maybe from their own institution or a former professor or some founder of the herbarium. And they realized they really wanted to sort of highlight this person's contribution to science. And so this is just a slide from one of our workshop presentations where I walked participants through doing this process for a heretofore sort of just unrecognized botanist in the state of Virginia by the name of Lena Bondurant Henderson. And together we went into Bionomia and we found her specimens. And that sort of makes light bulbs go off in people's head to realize that they can take these tools back home and continue. So over the past 2 years, we have delivered 4 workshops to 80 participants at 3 in-person professional conferences in the United States, as well as 1 online Zoom webinar. Participants hailed from institutions across the US, as well as 3 other countries. And if you sort of look at the list of participants, they really run the gamut from the career spectrum, from undergraduate students all the way through the emeritus level. We did assess the results from the participants. And I'll be very brief here. If you want to read more, we have published a report. But from the assessment data that were taken directly after the conclusion of each workshop, we learned that most participants reported very large learning gains in terms of the different tools that we were covering, such as Bionomia, such as what is GBIF, how does it work, how does Wikidata work? And overall, sort of the learning gains between sort of the junior participant cohort and the senior participant cohort were largely the same. But I think the most surprising outcome of this workshop, and it was very heartening to see, was the degree to which that the participants of this workshop shared what they learned with other people. We did an assessment 60 days after the conclusion of each workshop to just ask people, who did you tell? And we learned that more than 100 non-participating individuals were given some of this information. And these included people within botany or in other domains like entomology, people's graduate students, but even people like in their family. And just as at one point, 93% of workshop participants shared their knowledge and skills with another, at least one botanical colleague. And some people told 10 or more individuals. And we, my collaborators, I like take this amount of the breadth of this dissemination as a measure of how useful participants found this type of training. And so if you're interested in learning more, I include here a QR code, and that goes directly to our GitHub repository. We do encourage, and based on the success of this training, it was very well received. We really want to encourage other groups in plant systematics at other professional conferences, but also other domain groups in terms of the systematics community broadly, the mammalogists, the ichthyologists, to adapt this training for their communities. And so to support this, we have placed all project materials on a GitHub repository that you can get to by following this QR code. And we've also published an open access workshop report in the journal Research Ideas and Outcome. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their attention. I'm happy to field questions at the end of today's session, but also if you would like to send me an email directly, I'm more than happy to talk about this initiative and to answer more questions in detail about Bionomia. Although I may have to refer you to David Shorthouse for who is the brainchild behind that particular database. Right, that's it.
Thanks so much for that wonderful talk. I can't wait to dive more into all of these tools, and thanks for sharing them. Just a reminder, if you have specific questions for Andrea, in addition to reaching out for her, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll get to these at the end. So we're going to move on now to our third speaker today, who is Dr. Mauricio Bonifacino. Feel free to share your slides, Mauricio. Mauricio is another current leader of the IAPT, and he's also an associate professor at the Universidad de la República en Montevideo in the Schools of Agronomy and Natural Sciences. His research interests cover systematics of Compositae and floristics, and Mauricio is a member of the International Compositae Alliance, or TICA, and is currently collaborating with researchers across the globe to support the Global Compositae Database, a project started by Vicky Funk. And so with no further ado, go ahead and take it away, Mauricio. Let's see. I don't.
Can you hear me all right? Sorry about that.
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I thank everybody for their presence today, and I want to make echo of Lucia's word that is very, exciting to be in the presence of such an international and diverse community. And, in the end, this is what IAPT is about. So this is really a very exciting development, this series that IAPT is carrying on. So I appreciate the opportunity of sharing a little bit of the work I've been doing with a lot of people in the Compositae community. So I just want to share with you some things that we have been doing regarding the project that tries to put together a list of all the names associated with the large family Compositae. And this is a project that was born from the center of the International Compositae Alliance, or TICA, as is known. If you search online for TICA, you might get also that is the International Cat Association, but we are the ones that work with Compositae. And I could say that one of the pillars of the TICA community is the work on this database. I am just, the speaker of, much wider community that is trying to get this, at first, seemingly very daunting task of curating a list of names of arguably the largest plant family on the planet. And this, the idea of the database and also the TICA has been for quite a while among the community of researchers in composite. But I think it's fair enough to say that among those researchers, Vicky Fang, the researcher and systematics working for a long time at the Smithsonian, was the most prominent and more forceful proponent of all these endeavors. She really saw the potential and the need for having everybody, when I say everybody, I mean literally everybody around the world involved in projects. She saw how good was the collaboration and always try to carry on that torch of getting people from different corners of the world involved in different projects, and especially young people trying to get involved, all for the advancement of the trending of the composite. So it is not surprised that Vicky was in the middle of the creation of the what we now call Composite Global Database. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but this project started as the Global Compositae checklist at the beginning of this century. And there were a lot of folks involved, but the informatics part of it was based in New Zealand. You can see there some people that work there: Alan Patton, Ilse Breitweiser, Sherry Cooper. So this was a project that was part of postdoc by Christina Flam, and she is the one who tried to put together different sources of information, basically all the databases and repositories of plant names that existed, and try to extract from all of those sources, local floras, regional floras, the list of names, and try to do some cleanup of the data and aggregate them into a database that was especially built for that purpose. So the thing with databases is that they need to keep some funding to get them going and to be updated. And what happened with this global composite checklist is that when the funding ended, the possibility of updating and improving the capabilities also ended. So at that moment, through the connections that we made through international collaborations, the idea of finding another database that could harbor the information harvested so far for composite arrives from a very unlikely source, at least unlikely from the perspective of a group of organisms living in terrestrial environments, which was the database at the Flanders Marine Institute in Ostend, Belgium, that is called WORMS, or the AFIA database. So it is thanks to the people in Belgium that we found a new place for the composite database. And they offer the infrastructure, they offer the funding for initial training, and also because they hold several databases, they have a very important team of developers always making maintenance and making updates and improving the infrastructure of the database. So that was a very interesting proposition for us, because at that moment and currently we didn't have funds to develop something of that nature. And given the sheer size of the composite, you can see here a glimpse of the classification in what is almost 50 tribes now. It is a very, very daunting, undertaking to see how we can organize and edit that information. So if we look at the current database online, I'm going to show you in just a minute the actual database online. The total number of names that we have under the Compositae is almost 170,000 names. That represent currently a little bit over 33,000 species worldwide. This list of taxa is just the result mostly of that initial curation of information, right? So we still need to do a lot of work to keep these things updated, right? Because, you know, some names change the status. You could have synonyms. So these really need the involvement of the community because no single individual will tackle all this amount of information. And that is something that we are trying to promote from TICA now to get the whole community, not just the senior botanists that have worked for a whole life on the Compositae, but younger students that are doing their masters or their undergrad that are familiar with whatever group of Compositae. It doesn't need to be 100, 1,000 species. No, if you are familiar with a group that has 5, 10 species, you could be making a valuable contribution to the database. So of all those species, only 3% so far has been checked by taxonomic experts. So as you could see, we are a little bit far behind on that regard. But on the good side of news, and maybe to make the whole undertaking a little bit more enticing to to newcomers, the community of curators that curates the database is congregated in what we call the Compositae Working Group. And the Compositae Working Group is acting right now as the tent for the Worldflora Online with regard to the Compositae. And the good thing is, especially for young folks, is that if you start curating the database for Compositae and you register to Worldflora Online, in every publication of the data, of the update of the data of Worldflora Online, you will be listed as an author of that update of the Worldflora Online list. So it's not that your curation is going to go unnoticed. You will be noticed. You will be noticed in the TICA site per se, in the Global Compositae database, but also in this more international endeavor of the Worldflora Online. So I think that is one of the things that I think it makes the work more relevant is that, as I was explaining before, the possibility, with all the challenges that these new technologies and databases impose, the possibility of actually contributing to an international endeavor beyond the Compositae, also in the Worldflora Online, I think it is also an important thing to consider when participating in these databases. Because I understand, in the daily basis, we have a lot of commitments from research, teaching, administration, and filling a database is not always the most exciting thing and the hot topic in the field. And usually when you are submitting your evaluations, completing a database is not, very highly looked upon. But the truth is that once the database is built, everybody likes to mine that information and understand and, have a better access to understand a given group. So this is a truly, collaborative opportunity for people around the world to be participating in this project and sharing what you know. Because even if you are working in a group of very few species, you are the person that knows most about that group. And honestly, updating the database is a breeze if you really are familiar with that particular group. So just right now, I would like to show you some demo of the database so you could actually see that it's very easy to navigate. Let me just find my navigator here. So if you go to the compositae.org website, hold on a second. You will eventually find a link to the global composite database that will take you to this screen. So here is an basic information on how the database came to existence. Here are all the repositories that were used initially to gather all the names. And here is the list of the current editors that work in the curation of names. But I said again, if you are familiar with a group, no matter the size, and you are interested in curating those names, please send an email. I will leave the email at the end. And you could be also part of the Compositae working group and start contributing to this. So I'm going to log in here. So I'm going to show you the database from the perspective of the editor, okay? So there's a lot of fields to fill in, and some of them might look weird because let's keep in mind that this was a database designed from the perspective of animals, and especially marine animals. But from the perspective of the nomenclature side of the business, it's very solid and very easy to navigate. So ideally, I will search for a taxon here. So I'm going to search for a taxon that needs to be edited so you could see what this looks like. So I just searched for taxon, and I found several instances of that name. There are several varieties. I'm going to go for the one that has the status of a species. And notice that there's this yellow star that is empty. That yellow star empty means that the name has not been checked by a taxonomic expert. So I'm going to enter access to that taxon. And here I have a lot of information. I have the whole classification of where that specimen is placed in the context of current classification. I have the status. It says that it's unaccepted because it currently is a synonym of another genus. And here it says what the accepted name is. In this case, I know that that's not correct. So I'm going to proceed to edit. And then we have the direct children, so we could know in the case of this species, what subspecies or varieties have been described, so we could see them there. There's a list of the different editors that have edited a part of this, and then there are links to all different sort of information associated with that taxon. But let's say that we want to edit this taxon. There's a link here that says edit taxon, so we click there. And here we have the taxon name, the authors, the rank, who the parent is. And then in the status, we have the reason if the status is accepted or the reason for why the status, the name is not accepted. In this case, this is what in the context of the animal taxonomy is called junior subjective synonym. This is what we botanists call an heterotypic synonym. So I'm going to click this as a reason for unacceptance. And this is not correct. So I'm going to click it here. And I'm going to enter here the name of the plant that actually belongs, which is a Chromolaena. Okay, you already find the name. I make a click, and then I say update. So now the name Eupatorium subvastatum has been edited, has been checked, and the accepted name has been marked as the correct one. I could go now to this name, Chromolaena hirsuta, and mark it as checked. So with that, you just click on the, I need to come here to edit taxon. Species accepted, Okay, I could say update. And now the name has been checked. So it is as easy as that. It doesn't take much longer. Obviously, if I am not familiar with the group, I will need to go read the descriptions, check the type. That's not what we are asking the community to do here. And it's not the objective, really. The objective is that everybody that is familiar with the group, that has a clear understanding of what's going on there in terms of the taxonomy and the nomenclature, could actually contribute by editing those records for the benefit of the whole community. And you could also get the credit of having contributed to the creation of the database, forming part of the Compositae working group, but also forming part of the 10 of Compositae, currently providing the name for the international endeavor of the World Flora online. So I offer an invitation really to everybody in the world that is watching right now, that if you have experience having worked with a group of any size in the Compositae and would like to contribute, please send me an email and I will make sure that you are listed as a contributor, and I will reroute you to the tribal coordinator so you could start working together to improve the database. And if I could add a couple of extra announcements. Announcement number one is that on January, we are going to have a Tika community workshop that is to discuss several things pertaining to the Compositae. And one day, we're going to have a sort of hackathon to work on the global Compositae database. So that could be also a good opportunity for folks to become involved and up speed with the database. And the other announcement is that we are in the process of updating our Tika website. We are going to be, using the infrastructure that GBAF offers, similar to this website that the Legion people has. So we will have the nomenclature infrastructure that we have in the AFIA platform, packed together with all the wealth of information of these specimens of GBAF, plus a live tree to see the phylogeny and all those tools to see where the different clades are located in a map. So really exciting times for the Compositae and the Tika community. And with that, I finish and will gladly take any questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mauricio. What an important nomenclatural database. Advancing the World Flora Online and its mission goes beyond the World Flora Online even. It's the first and most fundamental target of the global strategy for plant conservation. And, this really underlies so much as a foundational output of what we do as taxonomists globally, means for just everyone downstream in biology who depends upon having accurate and correct names. So thank you, that's really great. It is my great pleasure to introduce now our fourth and final speaker for the webinar today, Dr. Pedro Jiménez-Mejías. Pedro holds a PhD in biological sciences from the University of Pablo de Olavide and is currently a Ramón y Cajal researcher, one of the most prestigious research programs in the European Union. Previously, Pedro held positions throughout the United States for 5 years at institutions including the Washington State University, the New York Botanical Garden, and the National Museum of Natural History, as well as experience as an assistant professor 5 years at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. He is a botanist who specializes in the taxonomy, phylogeny, and biogeography of the genus Carex in Cyperaceae, which is one of the 5 largest non-apomictic genera of vascular plants on Earth. His research integrates morphological, genetic, and geographic data to understand the diversification of the Sporeotropical lineage. Pedro has conducted studies on Carex collections in over 30 herbaria across all continents, and in close collaboration with local botanists has led multiple field expeditions over several weeks with a special focus in the Andes. You're going to have an opportunity now to see a sort of complementary database to what you just saw with Mauricio's presentation, which utilizes the global Cyperaceae database. And so you'll see another implementation of a nomenclatural database that is very similar to what you just saw, but a different take on it. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Pedro, and we're all excited to see your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. Thank you, everybody, for thank you to the organizer for hosting me here today as part of the webinar, and everybody for attending it. Don't worry, I won't be repetitive with Mauricio. So I'm going to talk about a project I've been working during the last 2 years that has been compiling the global Cyperaceae database. I'm not only going to present the idea of the database itself, but also I will talk about the opportunities, offer, and challenges we have to face to build such a tool. First, let me introduce a bit the importance of sedges, because this is a family that sometimes remain unnoticed. Despite it is one of the 10 largest plant families, and as you said before, Carex is part of it, and is one of the 5 largest plant genera in the world. Carex and Cyperaceae has cosmopolitan distribution, and they are ecologically important because they can be dominant elements in the environment as wetlands, and also, in the case of Carex, in high altitude and latitude habitats. Well, what is this about the global Cyperaceae database? The idea goes beyond a classic database. It tries to solve the taxonomic impediment for sedges, serving as a taxonomic compilator. All we know that the taxonomic data is sparse and difficult to access for most potential users if they are not familiar with the situation. And in some cases, the main sources of certain kind of data can be found in a few websites. But in others, the situation will be much more complex because the information will be dispersed among many different resources. This way, due to the taxonomic impediment from the wealth of data, this potentially, sorry, I'm having an interruption. Tierra, por favor. Tierra. Claro. Things of having a cat and being at home. My apologies. I was saying that in some cases, the main sources of certain kind of data will be in a few websites, but in others, the situation will be much more complex because information will be dispersed among many different resources. This way, due to the taxonomic impediment from the wealth of data that is potentially available out there to boost research in taxonomy, most taxonomists are able to readily reach only a tiny portion to nurture their work. With the global Cyperaceae database, we aim to compile the available taxonomic data into a single online portal as a new integrative tool, a sort of worldwide updated taxonomic treatment, providing in one single place all the information that is useful for us taxonomists now, and being a platform dynamic and updatable. To do that, we created a partnership of 3 institutions, the Pablo de la Vida University from Seville in Spain, which I belong to, Kew Botanical Gardens, and the same institution behind the Global Compositae database, the Marine Institute of Flanders. We were able to obtain funds from 2 different sources, so keep that in mind. It is possible to get funds for taxonomy. So 2 projects for only 1 idea. And about taxonomy, I've never seen that before. So we got lucky and started building the database. Essentially, we started transferring all the data of interest into the platform AFIA. That is the platform that is managed by the Marine Institute of Flanders. As Mauricio said, AFIA is the database that underlies worms, the World Register of Marine Species, that is an animal database. In our case, AFI underlies a number of animal-based projects which fits with taxonomical information. In our case, AFIA, as in the case of the Compositae database, serves one of the first botany-based projects, compiling botanical information, in our case, about sedges. Well, how we did that? We designed a plan that should have worked perfectly. First, we made a list of the resources we needed, descriptions, herbarium material, images, etc. And we started compiling it in the core team at my university, at Palo de la Vida University. The compiled information was assembled into a provisional input, and that was shared with the network of contributors, the editors, that in our case are the International Sedge Society, a network of researchers working on the family Cyperaceae. The contributors will give us feedback, either curating the database, either curating the data we mined, or providing new data. The final output, after they revise the data, would be a taxonomic entry, much like in a flora, similar to the one in the Compositae database, that would be published into the Cyperaceae database and would be authored by the contributors themselves. That's a strategy we thought that could engage people, as I will explain later. Well, where are we? Well, as by today, the project has made great progress, mainly because of the work of an active core team. We initially exported from POWO the checklist with over 30,000 names. We have been processing the checklist with the contributors. We reached, as an agreement, almost 6,000 accepted species. 4,000 of them have been already submitted to basic editions, linking types, linking protologs. And we also have linked many taxonomic references and type specimens from their respective sources. We are a bit behind on distributions and images of details. For the distributions, we have only curated less than half the number of species of the family. And for the detailed images, digitization is in progress. Despite we potentially have on hand samples for more than 60% all the species of Cyperaceae, we have only imaged 300 of them. So that's the result, similar to the global Compositae database because we share the same platform. The website is already available at cyperaceae.org, and the species entry, when complete, look like that. So if I access, do you see my Google Chrome exploration tag? Okay, so that would be the entry for Carex nevadensis. In our case, similar as in global Compositae database, we have the synonyms. Down here, we linked the protologs, so everybody has access to the very base of the nomenclatural information. We are linking morphological descriptions and taxonomic notes, trusted ones, so it has the information right there for everybody to read it. At the bottom, when an entry is complete, you can see that we linked other kind of taxonomic information. So if you need to learn about this taxon, that is Carex nevadensis, all the research available on this taxon is listed down here. As an additional data, where we have compiled distribution, we linked the GBIF on our maps. And something that I think is the most important, we have been able to link a wealth of herbarium types. So we click and we directly get access to the type material. So all the basic information on the taxonomy of this species in particular can be seen in just one space. But everything has not gone so smoothly, and we have to deal with issues. That's something I want to share with you, so we can learn and discuss. First, we had issues because we were overambitious and we were not realistic about the goals. We didn't really know the limitations until we started working on them. And one of those problems came from the very fact that AFIA platform was created to host animal databases. So a transition to botany had to be slow, smooth, and progressive. Otherwise, we could affect the common frameworks shared with the other animal-based project. Just let me show you an example. That is something that Mauricio showed you before. Those are the kind of unaccepted names, and you can see at one glance that there are differences in the terminology they use. If you see that junior homonym, junior subjective synonym, those are terms that we botanists are not familiar with. But they have a straightforward translation. They have an equivalence in botany. The problem is not having implemented those in time became a barrier for the editors to engage and actually discourage some of them to complete this part of the species entry. AFIA is working on it, so hopefully we, the botanists, should have an alternative soon. In other instances, we made requests to AFIA that were too complex to implement without affecting AFIA itself. So those ideas, we had to leave them aside. One of these examples, which we believed was a great idea, was the automatic link of validated iNaturalist images. So we envision that if we filter observations by trusted identifiers, we could provide to the website a wealth of well-identified pictures to illustrate the species. But implementing that on the website was not as easy as we believe, and we are working on it. It's not available yet. But also, let me say that people from Worms and AFIA have working very hard with us, and they are fantastic. I'm not complaining about them. I'm talking about the problems we encountered to implement our idea, but we also created our own bottlenecks. For example, one example was photo documenting tiny structures. It took way longer than we believed. Tiny structures like fruits or spikes are key for the identification of sedges, so the website needed to document them. But if you check the times we need for manipulating samples and taking the image, to do that for all the families Hyperaceae, we have needed one person full-time entirely dedicated to that for more than 1 year. And our team had to do more things, so that's why we are so behind in digitization of small structures. We also had issues with engagement. Despite everybody liked the final result, people were not so keen to join in the way to it. For example, editors became reluctant to join because the authorship formula. So AFIA prefer collective neutral authorships like Cyperaceae working group, but editors did not like it, as they saw that it did not give recognition to their work. So we worked in several alternatives. Here you can see this is what we call the full citation, which is crazy the number of people involved. But as contributions are asymmetrical, it's not the same to be editing the 2,000 species of carex that be editing the 5 of Abilgardia. We decided to create individual authorships for genera. But this is not so simple. This is further complicated. Where are the editors? The editors are here. You have to make a search. Here is everybody. It's not easy. So despite all the efforts, the editors didn't like the collective authorship, but they don't like the authorship formulas we enable either. So this is actually a true barrier for engagement. This, together with the learning curve of managing a FIAM platform, affected the effective engagement of all the editors. And thing is that they are working. They are working. But the weight of the project is almost on the core team. They don't edit, they request all the time. Another issue came with the data material accessibility. Everything is out there, but it's not accessible. It's not always accessible. The main example has been the problem with the herbaria. Some herbaria were reluctant to collaborate because we were strangers. It's like, who's these people? Why they want the links to our collections? The large collections were an exception. We have been able to link almost all the main herbaria of the world with the Saperaceae database. We did not show the coming restrictions to loans. That has limited our ability to digitize fruits. And something that was shocking to us, that some of the key material was not digitized or even absent from the databases we consulted. So not everything is out there. There's still has to do a lot of work. And eventually, we are worried, we have been always worried about the long term, because as Mauricio said before, once the fund is gone, the project seems to be gone. And making the database is something good, but the best possible thing we can do is making it last. In this sense, the persistence of the platform and the data it houses is not an issue, precisely because of AFIA. AFIA has an extensive record of service for multiple platforms, which proves AFIA robustness. And we can say that AFIA is a true strength for our project. And as also happens with the Compositae database, the International Sedge Society is the team responsible for the family Saperaceae in World for Online, which works as a backup because we have a transfer agreement. So all our taxonomic framework is transferred twice a year into World for Online, which is another of the strengths of the project. And eventually, what worries me the most, the dependence of the website in this very moment on one single team. Given the problems of engagement, most taxonomic information implemented in the platform has been developed by our core team in our university. To ensure platform future as something truly dynamic, we need greater engagement. And we also need a future leadership transition. So the platform won't rely on our team, on me as the principal investigator, but on other teams too. So summarizing, taxonomic aggregators are needed and useful. I hope all we agree now. We have to be aware that the initial plan may be somehow different from the final result. So it is key to remain open and understand the limitations. And finally, a long-term plan is needed to ensure the lasting of the effort beyond the duration of the funding project. And that's all. Thank you very much. I would like to thank to the funding institution that enabled the project, to Morgan, because of the useful discussions and comparison with the Global Compositae database, preparing our own database, and to the teams involved in all this data mining and editing until now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro. That was a wonderful talk. I appreciate you highlighting both the challenges and the successes of your database. It'll be fun to potentially discuss even more similarities between these two databases and questions. And so now let's take one more opportunity to thank all the speakers combined, Barbara and Andrea and Mauricio and Pedro. Thank you guys so much. I think our plan now is just to start going through the questions. We've already had quite a few great questions in the chat as an individual talk. So I think what we'll do is just first see if you asked a question in the chat, if you would like to answer it. And we'll start with the questions from Barbara's talk to begin with. We'll go back to that. Are either Muweli or Carmen around to unmute and ask your questions? Or let me know in the chat if you prefer I read them out loud. Well, let's go ahead. I can just go ahead and read those for now. So Muweli asks for you, Barbara, is the registration of private herbaria allowed in Index Herbariorum?
The answer is yes, assuming that the other rules are followed. The only rules are you have to come up with a unique code, you have to have at least one specimen, and you have to allow other people who have a reasonable reason to do so to examine the specimens. But yes, private herbaria are welcome, and there are at least maybe 20 in Index Herbariorum.
Excellent, thanks. We also got a question from Carmen, who asks about in her experience using the Index Herbariorum website, it's often down, which is frustrating as a user for such a wonderful resource. Is this related perhaps to the automatic harvest of information from companies like Google and the likes that slow down or even crash our botanical websites?
So I don't know about that, the Google part. I do know that a few months ago, there developed some incompatibility between our web coding and the database. And things are continually updating on the axial provider of our database. And so it took quite a while, as I understand it, to get to the bottom of what this incompatibility was. Things have been better recently. It does go down sometime. It really reflects the use of the resource. All I can recommend for that, I would recommend if you're a frequent user to download the whole data set so you have a spreadsheet. It'll eventually become out of date, but you will have it. You could also try GR Cycall, which is updated every month. So you can go there. Be aware that they don't use codes, our codes, to sort the data. You'll have to enter a bit more information. For example, if you wanted to look up Missouri Botanical Garden, you'd need to get most efficiently, it'd be best to type in Missouri Botanical Garden, but you will see information that's up to date as of the past week. And yeah, I wish it was up all the time, but I guess, there are problems that can't always be addressed instantly.
Great, thank you. There are a couple of other questions that have been sent maybe privately or just otherwise. I can just go through kind of a couple of those if there aren't other questions in the chat. One of them was for Andrea about Bionomia. Someone asked if you encourage taxonomists to use their Bionomia profile as an item in their curriculum vitae to highlight the taxonomic work that they've been involved with. And if so, do you have any suggestions for how to integrate that page or the data from that page into a CV?
Yeah, so it depends how you structure your CV, but basically the citation is for this year. So basically when I put in my annual report, there are different categories, but I list that because it is basically my work, sort of like it's up to date for this year. So my citation for this year will be for 2025. I include that as a publication. There's context to it, so my supervisors understand what it is, but it's absolutely an intellectual contribution. We're making these every single year, and unless you publish like a journal paper, you often don't get credit for it. And the more people stand up and say, this is my work, it matters, and I'm making a contribution to my profession, the more people will understand. Because with so much of our work gets done quietly behind doors.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you. Maybe just as one more follow-up with you, there was another question about when do you make a Bionomia page for someone else? And when do you either encourage a colleague to make their own using their ORCID? And what strategies might you have for those of us in the taxonomic community to encourage our colleagues who might be reluctant to set that up and make it public? Do you have like a quick pitch that we can make to our colleagues for helping with that?
It helps to get a bead on what that person might be concerned about. Certainly talking to people who are emeritus, who are, in their 70s or 80s and may not be comfortable working with these tools or honestly even understand how it works. They just see it just not being worth their effort. They're just not interested in it. I've had people pair with emeritus professors and help them set it up. But the issue with people who are alive is that you can't claim their specimens for them unless they make their profile public. I mean, it's their information, right? That once they see this in action, they understand, particularly like if you talk to them about a historical example, about how we were able to piece together this person's life history and understand sort of the genesis of their ideas and track down really important specimens. Often people who are later in sort of thinking about their legacy go, oh, this is why people want this information public, and it's for posterity's sake. And there are many other reasons why, but certainly pairing up with someone to explain to them how it works and just help them through it. The learning curve is steep, but it's short, like in my opinion. And sometimes you just need a friend to help show you how it gets done. And then for a historical person who is deceased, anyone can make up a page for that person. And often it's if you become an expert in that person's biography, you are the most important person to actually uncover their specimens because you know their handwriting, you know which institutions they're associated with, and it can really link things together to uncover things like field notebooks that you didn't know existed that can help add value to herbarium specimens, to rescue dates of collection that maybe aren't clear on the label. You can get that information if you know who that person is. So as a curatorial tool, this biographical information is it's just gold, in my opinion. I am biased.
Awesome. I agree. I think there's a lot of institutional value as well for reporting metrics like this that you can send to the institution, right? That of course they would be interested in. Thank you. I see there's another question in the chat for Barbara, which is from Mauricio. Any updates? Toning on Herbaria should be then sent to you, right? Mauricio, do you want to ask that? I think I'm
sorry.
misreading.
The corrector got wrong. I was just confirming that any updates pertaining to information on the herbarium should go directly to you, right? There's now a place where you put updated information directly. We send you our updated records, staff that's working in a number of collections, all that to you directly.
Use the update feature in Index Herbariorum. If you look on the main page and you scroll a little bit below the search box, you'll see there are options for how you do it. I'd prefer you not to email it to me directly, but to use the form. The form comes to me, and then I can check it and approve it. But if you send me updates, I will most likely send you an email that says, thank you, but please use the following update instructions.
Excellent. Thank you.
It results in much better data because it is often easier to fill out a form than to just suggest one thing. Because often when you really look carefully at your records, you see, oh yeah, there's several things to be updated. So it's better to, that's the better way to do it.
Excellent.
And I'll get
Thank
back to you if I have any questions.
I'd like to hear some thoughts from the folks who are running the taxonomic databases. And this was a private question we had specifically for Mauricio, but I think we can hear from both Pedro and Mauricio about this. And that is, do you have suggestions for taxonomists working with other taxa to form their own CEN or other, sort of conspecific network and begin a nomenclatural database similar to what you guys talked about? Any advice you guys have?
I mean, the power of collaboration is just very plain to see. All the benefits of putting all the data in one place and having, people's work being appreciated and being included there and letting everybody to have the possibility to have their say. I think that that's a powerful tool. Definitely, I will encourage everybody to get organized. Start having informal chats over Zoom or whatever application. Start discussing, have an agenda, figure where you're going to go. And I think that that's at least that's what we are trying to do. And I just want to make a short comment to Pedro. Very nice to meet you, Pedro, by the way. And I congratulate the work you have done and your team with the Cyperacy. You guys, got lucky that you got your funding, but you really get a very organized schedule and try to put all that information. Well, you achieve certain things. So, yeah, you were saying that you were far behind. We are far behind. but yeah, I know that there's an issue with the sizes, but I think that this is the beauty of it. That when I was talking about the perils of AI and all the electronic things, this is the good stuff. This is what makes people connect and collaborate to a larger project. So I think that's what I like about it.
If I would have to add something, I would just repeat what I said during my presentation. Be sure about the structure of the database you're relying on, see the opportunities, see the limits, and something that I think that no one see coming, that it's better to use an upside down strategy. Don't go taxon by taxon. Start uploading things like as in bulk. A lot of literature, a lot of herbarium material, a lot of occurrences, because this is what makes the database apparent. That's what makes the database useful for other people's eyes. Otherwise, you will go one by one typing the data for one single species each time, and it doesn't make it viable. That's why I laugh when Mauricio said that we made progress, because we started going taxon by taxon at the beginning, and it was a nightmare. And we decided to turn around the situation, and we were able to put a lot of data at once, and that's essentially what we are seeing now. So that would be my advice.
One other interesting way to look at it is when you are entering the information, try to also use a hierarchical approach, going for the higher, ranks before. So in a way, you will have complete coverage until a certain level. Maybe to have all those descriptions at the beginning of all the species is not feasible. But if you start, for instance, with the tribes, you can have a description for all tribes at one point. So at a certain level of the classification, you will have all the information. So that's also something compatible with that strategy that you were just mentioning, Pedro. Yeah.
I love that we've moved from question and answer to actual collaborative strategy session. That is ultimately one of the things we want these webinars to sort of facilitate. Those are great suggestions from both of you. I sort of wanted to start to wrap up with one more question that's kind of for all of you that we have. And that is, all of the talks in this session sort of highlight broader impacts of what we do as taxonomists, and not just broader impacts theoretically, but the application of broader impacts for taxonomy in real world differences. And so wanted to ask if, specifically you mentioned about funding, Mauricio, if, and congratulating Pedro and his team, if any of you have suggestions or strategies for how these databases and the broader impacts that they convey can and should be utilized effectively to help us as taxonomists combat the taxonomic impediment and get funding for our important work.
That is a tough cookie that you are after, Morgan. You know, I will just vent my own frustration in my country, where we are just about to unveil the flora for the country, and it will offer a wealth of information of the plants, and that has taken generations to put together and a few years to translate into electronic format. And now everybody will have access to that information, right? But whenever we go to a public office to ask for some little bit of funding, oh, it's always tough. No, it's always possible for that. But that sort of information is what these people is always after, and we are offering it. So it's what I mentioned at the beginning. Databases, fill a database is not seen as something exciting and that you are riding the wave of progress and advancement. But everybody likes to use the information. So I don't know. I find it. We need to make it very sexy looking, that data that we are presenting, in a way to try to get this ministries of environment, of agriculture or whatever, to really see what is revolving around these databases. And the other thing is, and this also goes into connection to the talk that both Barbara and Andrea deal with, is the importance of collections onto this database as the ultimate source of information to validate the presence of these taxa or the contributions of these botanists. So it's like they are at the center, and that problem that we're mentioning about the disappearance of herbaria, well, I think it's all connected. Everybody seems to agree that conserving biodiversity is important. It's important. It's one of the items in the list of the Biological Convention agreements that make this information available. But that doesn't happen just with a flick of a wand. You need people entering data. You need time to pay for people. So, I mean, at some point, those two lines of thought need to be on the same level so they could see why one matter to the other. But it's complicated.
Absolutely. I'm curious, as sort of two of the NSF and European Union and other federal funded projects, Andrea with Bionomia and Pedro, if you have just as a closing word, any advice that wouldn't give away a trade secret necessarily, but for others in the community of taxonomy who are looking for funding, how to tie in to this concept of the broader impact of nomenclatural databases and collections databases to support.
I can just two things come to my head. I mean, NSF wants innovation, like that's, and as Mauricio said, sort of these fundamental databases aren't considered innovative. But I think well, again, it depends on what the funder is, but if you are using this infrastructure to do something novel, such as, applying that database in a novel way. Yes, the database is standardized and it's top quality, but you're doing it maybe to accelerate a taxonomic revision in like a new and innovative way. That's one thought. And then the other thought that I had was, in terms of building these databases, like contributing to these databases as a broader impact, like you are training people how to add information to this database. So sort of like with my workshop grant, I'm training people how to do this work. And so that they see that as like a human resource development thing for like the next generation of student training. But I agree with everything Mauricio said. I mean, people think this stuff just exists like sunshine. It just sort of falls out of the sky in this perfect form, and we expect it to be there. And a lot of people are under the assumption that we already know everything on this planet, that it like we figured it out 300 years ago, and it's just a matter of like writing it down. There is no more discovery to be done. And I think a lot of people have that misunderstanding about biodiversity on this planet.
For sure.
To add something, at least in my case, if you saw the species entry I showed, it copies the format of the flora. And the way I present that, at least for the European Union, data transference is something they like. And a flora is the way we transfer the ultimate, the ultimate way we transfer botanical knowledge to society. It's in the form of a treatment. And that's where I emphasize. And that's how I think in the next projects we are requesting, we will save a portion of the budget to transfer the advance in the knowledge into the database. So we will be able to save every time a little bit of money to not let the database die.
Wonderful. That's a great strategy to sort of keep that sustainability aspect. Well, we are over time. I want to thank all of the speakers just immensely for your time and your expertise and sharing with the IAPT member community through this webinar. I wanted to wrap up with a couple of quick points. One, I wanted to ask everyone who's on if you could turn your camera on if you feel comfortable so that we could just get a quick photo screen grab from everyone. And that way we can post that on social media and things. And I wanted to end with 4 quick bullet points as well while y'all are unmuting your video, not unmuting, but turning on your video. First of all, is save the date for December 5th. That will be our 3rd IAPT webinar in this series, and it'll highlight the role of taxonomy in advancing agricultural and breeding sciences. We will also, Lucia mentioned at the beginning that the IAPT grants have just opened. You can find those online at the web link that was linked in the chat at the beginning of the webinar. That includes the research grants as well as the small collections grants. And there will be 2 virtual grant writing workshops in December on the 10th and 11th. For anyone who is interested in submitting one of those grants, please participate in one of those workshops and you'll get a lot of really helpful tips. There will be 2 more grant writing workshops in January on the 14th and 15th as well. Also, as a reminder, this year marks 75 years since the founding of IAPT. And of course, as we all know, IAPT serves a vital role in supporting plant, fungal, and algal taxonomy, nomenclature, and the taxonomists who contribute to this foundational work. So if you're a member, if you haven't renewed your membership, please do so. A lot of the funding that supports IAPT activities really does come from those membership renewals. If you have students or colleagues who might be struggling to pay their membership, consider funding a gift award membership to them. It's very reasonable, especially for students who might be curious to apply for a grant. And of course, grants are only eligible for members. So maybe consider that in your gift giving this at the end of this year. Lastly, just to remind you all, this session has been recorded and it'll be made freely available to everyone through the YouTube, the IAPT YouTube, and we'll share that with membership as soon as possible. One added benefit, of course, of being a member is even though these recordings are made freely available, you get to attend and participate live and ask questions as a member. And so that really is something that the importance can't be overstated. So thank you again, and a huge round of applause to all of our wonderful speakers today for just wonderful presentations. And with that, we'll see you in December on the 5th for our 3rd in this webinar series. Thank you again.